Welcome to the first episode in a Legendarium series about the Scythians. In Part 1, Masters of Horse and Bow, we will talk about the origins of the Scythians and how the skill set required for this nation of nomads, like horsemanship and archery, ultimately turned them into unstoppable warriors. The Scythian homeland covered the vast Eurasian steppe from what is now central Siberia in China to the northern coast of the Black Sea. Though their origins are obscure, the Scythians themselves had a legend that they sprang from the three sons of Targataus, a man of supernatural birth who lived near the Black Sea coast. The three brothers lived together in peace until four golden implements, a plow, a yoke, a battle axe, and a drinking cup, fell from the sky and caught fire. The two elder brothers tried to pick up the burning implements, but could not hold them. Ultimately, Calaxus, the youngest brother, proved to be the only one who could pick up the burning objects, and so became the first king of Scythia. The Greeks, in turn, believed that the Scythians came from a union between Zeus and one of his many girlfriends, a snake-legged goddess. They had a son named Scyth, whose descendants conquered the steppe and gave their father's name to the new nation. Indeed, the origins of the Scythians are fertile ground for mythmakers because very little is known about the Scythians' early days. Most likely, the first Scythians migrated to the area around 900 BC. They were probably Shrubnea people who moved in a series of waves from the Volga River Valley around the Ural Mountains into the northern coast of the Black Sea and eventually populated Central Asia. They either pushed out or absorbed other nomadic peoples who lived in Central Asia. However, the Scythians would not have called themselves Scythians. They tended to identify with their tribe, and some of those tribal names have survived. The Callipydae and the Alazones ranked among the most powerful as they controlled the fertile steppe lands. The eastern nation lived near the Altai Mountains and perfected the art of hunting on horseback with hunting hawks. Scythians who lived near the Dnieper River practiced a semi-nomadic lifestyle, venturing into the grasslands during the summer, but always returning to the river valley to tend their farms. However, it was the nomadic peoples of the high steppe who defined what it meant to be a Scythian in the mind of the great nations to the south. These nomads lived in the lowest reaches of Siberia, a geographic region that covers 8 time zones from the Pacific to the Arctic. It includes 3 major ecological zones: icy tundra at the north, where only moss and grass grow in the half-frozen soil, dense forest in the central region, and finally a wide grassy corridor that provides much grazing for large herbivores like horses and cattle. And these two animals became the basis of Scythian culture. On the open steppe, the Scythians became master horsemen, in part because they needed to find the most efficient ways to move their cattle around in search of new grazing ground. The Scythians developed horse breeding and riding to a whole new level without the use of spiked bits or muzzles, mainly using saddles and bridles. In battle, the horses of chiefs and great men wore elaborate costumes like headgear decorated with elk antlers, saddles covered with plaques that portrayed combat scenes, and long dangling pendants that hung from their necks. Most horses reached the age of 15 or 20 years before they died, and we know how much the Scythians prized their horses because they often asked to have their mounts buried with them. When a horse's owner died, the mount would be killed with a hard blow from a pointed axe. Horse riding gear like bridles, halters, whips, pouches, and shields also joined men as grave goods, a reminder of how much the Scythians prized horse riding. Like many nomadic societies, the skill set required of men in peacetime translated easily to war. Scythian life was based on herding cattle, so boys learned to ride horses at a young age. They also learned to use weapons, especially the bow and arrow, in large part to drive away wolves and thieves from their herds. Strikingly, Scythian girls and unmarried women rode alongside the men and boys. In the rough and ready equality that emerged between men and women in Central Asia, women not only learned to ride, but handle the bow and arrow, the javelin, and even darts. And when these men and women rode into battle together, they could ride their horses in circles while raining arrows upon their enemies. In combat, a typical Scythian wore light armor made from animal hide and a leather helmet. Only the chieftains and their relations could afford chainmail tunics and iron weapons. In combat, the light skirmishers would wear down the enemy and force them to bunch together by firing thousands of arrows at them, and then the chief's heavy cavalry finished them off with a thunderous charge. The Scythians became masters of cavalry warfare, able to attack quickly and then vanish into an ocean of grass. To help them further, the Scythians developed a new type of bow made from different layers of wood and sinew. Far more powerful than a regular wooden bow, these different layers increased the force of the string when released, and for strings for these composite bows, the Scythians used horsehair or animal tendons. This bow would have been heavy and extraordinarily stiff, meaning that Scythian horse archers required immense strength, and stories told of Scythian arrows hammering through skulls and even punching through iron armor. An expert archer could fire 10 or 12 arrows within a minute and carried a quiver stuffed with as many as 150 arrows. Even worse, they dipped their arrowheads in poison so men who survived slight wounds might die of poisoning later. When fighting on foot, the Scythians preferred a battle axe with a long and narrow-pointed blade, much like a pickaxe. This type of fighting would be done up close and personal, and Scythian warriors punctured holes in the skulls of their enemies. A medieval writer who saw similar horse archers in action described them as such. They do not let up until they have achieved the complete destruction of their enemies. And if one wishes to know just how central archery became to the Scythians, one need only look at their name. Scythian likely comes from the Assyrian word askus, which means archer. And like many nomadic nations, the Scythians did not leave behind many written records. However, a Greek writer named Pseudo-Hippocrates noted that the Scythians did not live in houses, but rather small wagons with 4 wheels. Chieftains and wealthy warriors had 6-wheeled wagons covered with felt. When arranged in formations of 2 or 3, they provided men and cattle with shelter from rain and wind. While women and children tended to remain in the wagons while on the move, the men spent almost all their waking hours on horseback. Within the wagons, the Scythians had few material possessions and no furniture, but only small drinking flasks and wooden bowls. Some of the more fearsome warriors turned the skulls of slain enemies into drinking cups. Only elite families owned low tables designed to be dismantled and reassembled on the move. But any Scythian housewife, no matter how humble, wanted thick floor coverings for her wagon floor, like sheepskins or felt rugs, though the wife of a chieftain could probably get a Persian carpet acquired through trade or raid. Men and boys spent most of their time herding the cattle that the Scythians depended on, not only for meat and milk, but cattle bones to make into tools, bladders to make into canteens, and skins to turn into leather. This combination of archery, horsemanship, and mobility would turn the Scythians into a war machine that not even the mightiest empires could ignore. We'll find out later what happens when the Scythians attacked. I hope you enjoyed this episode of The Legendarium. If you did, press like. If you want to see more, press subscribe, and if you've got anything to say, let me know in the comments section. Thanks again for joining me, and I hope that you have a great rest of the day.